Smooth Talkers. We're here in the office. You can see we're feeling festive. We've got our decorations up for today, Halloween. So if you're in the spirit for Halloween, good for you. So today I'm going to be giving you a bit of a class on Australian slang. Now actually I'm from the United States. I grew up in Iowa, so maybe we can pan over to the map. In the very center of the United States, this is where I come from. So,
yeah, Scott is there.
Okay, so why is someone from Iowa going to tell you about Australian slang? Good question. I lived in Australia for about 5 or 6 years, so I have a pretty good understanding of some of the things that you might hear if you go to Australia. And because I was in a similar position as a foreigner, I had to learn all these words for the first time, and it can be a little bit confusing. So I hope today's lesson gives you a little bit of an advantage for your trip to Australia if you have something coming up. If not, there's some really great Australian television, TV shows, and music, and so you'll be able to engage with that material better. So, just a few notes about our office here. We are just steps away from the metro station at Pedro Valdivia. I don't know the exact street, I don't remember. I'm still new. But we are offering a lot of things here at Smooth Talkers. We have individual classes. We have group classes that are starting soon, next month, early next month. So if you like this sort of format where you can interact with your teacher directly and also have perhaps a fun, slightly more affordable perhaps, way of learning English in a group, I recommend that you go online, check out our website, our social media, and you can get some more details there. And I'd encourage you to come in and join our classes. Alternatively, we also have a lot of classes with corporations. So if your company has an HR department who wants to promote English, feel free to give us a call. We do that as well. We can offer a lot of range of services. Okay, so I think now let's move into our classroom. So if you'll follow me. So we're going to be talking about Australia, and as you see on the board is a very basic map of Australia.
What?
I teach English, not art. So, as you know, Australia is across that gigantic ocean, the Pacific, from Chile, but there are two cities that you can access via a non-stop flight. So in just a short 12 hours, you can find yourself in sunny Australia. So of course, the main city is Sydney. And Sydney is a beaut. It is beautiful. And Sydney is accessible by non-stop flight from Santiago. Many people would probably choose to go there as one of their primary destinations. We also have Melbourne here. Now, this city does not follow the rules of pronunciation when we say it. You might be tempted, like me, to say Melbourne. But Australians say Melbourne. So if you think of the bin in the corner of the room, the trash can, Melbourne, you're getting a bit closer to the pronunciation. And Melbourne, yes. Yes, so we don't hear much R here. One of the other major cities is Brisbane. So again, you might be tempted to say Brisbane, but the locals say Brisbane. Or In the theme of our lesson today, Aussie slang, you're going to learn that a lot of Aussie slang is simply making words shorter. And so Brisbane is very affectionately known as Brizzy. Brizzy. So Brisbane, you might hear, oh, I went to Sydney, and then I went up to Brizzy. And that's Brisbane. Just on the coast is a place called the Gold Coast. Whoops. A place called the Gold Coast. You might hear people call this Goldie. This is a place that has beautiful beaches, high-rise buildings. It feels a little bit like Miami, perhaps, a little bit. And Australians like to call it
Goldie.
Yeah, Goldie. Here between the Gold Coast and Sydney is a town called Newcastle, which takes its name from the one in England. However, of course, locals like to shorten this name. You might have a guess. This one is called sometimes Newey. So you might go from Sydney for a weekend up in Newey. Okay. Down here we have an island. This is a state of Australia. It's called Tasmania. And of course it also has a shortened name, Tassie.
I imagine. Yeah.
Yes. You're starting to notice the theme.
Yeah.
Over here we have Adelaide.
And what is the capital of Australia?
I'll come back to that one. Adelaide. Adelaide is actually a very sleepy town, but it's beautiful. And sometimes in a very sarcastic way, Australians will call it Radelaide. Because it's so quiet and boring, it's the opposite of rad. Okay, and over here we have Perth. And Perth is just one syllable, there's not much way to shorten that. So, we had a question from the audience. What's the capital of Australia? Is it Sydney? Is it Melbourne?
No.
Guess what? Neither.
Melbourne, yeah?
Neither. The capital of Australia was built as a planned city around the turn of the century, a little over 100 years ago, roughly. And basically, the people in Sydney wanted Sydney to be the capital of Australia. The people in Melbourne felt the same. And in order to solve this dispute, this conflict between these two cities in this new nation, they developed a new capital here in a place that is called Canberra. So again, if you look at this and try to read it phonetically, you might be tempted to say Canberra, but it's just two syllables, Canberra. Canberra. And this is where the political capital of the country is. This is where the government sits, but it's a very small city, and not a lot of people go there for tourism, so if you want to do something a little different, you can go to Canberra.
Someone says they're from, they say hi from Punta Arenas.
Oh,
Do you
Punta
know
Arenas.
where Punta Arenas is?
I know it's way south.
Close to the Antarctic with the penguins.
Yes, yes. So, probably a little bit similar to Tasmania in terms of the climate. This is a really beautiful place with wonderful beaches, pristine nature, very clean. Not a lot of people there, but it's pretty cold, even in summertime, with a lot of cold water coming from the Arctic. Okay.
And in the what is anything in the middle?
So, Australia is covered by a huge array of deserts. It's a very, very dry continent. So in that way, it might be a little bit similar to Chile, as much of Chile is a dry place. So there's not a lot of cities in the center. There is a place here called Alice Springs, which is exactly in the center of Australia. which is very close to one of the most famous sites in Australia, which is called Uluru. This is the indigenous name for this sacred site. It's a red rock, it's enormous, and it's breathtaking. It's very beautiful and very spiritual.
And how long it takes to get there?
Well, if you fly there, it's probably from Melbourne to this area, I would say about 3 hours. But be prepared because it's quite expensive. To get to this part of the country is pretty expensive, so you need to prepare for that. A lot of tourists don't make it there because you use most of your travel budget to get there.
And where did you go?
So I was there a long time. There are 8 states and territories in Australia. There are 6 states. So up here is Queensland. Here is New South Wales. This state here is Victoria. Tasmania is a state. Here is South Australia. And roughly, here is Western Australia. Okay, so those are the 6 states. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is called the Northern Territory. So it's a territory. And the capital itself is called ACT, Australian Capital Territory. And so it has its own laws there as well. And then there are some offshore islands and other territories or jurisdictions. Okay, so that's a bit about the geography of Australia. Now, what is Australia known for? The Australian culture is really interesting. It's a very...
Sorry, there's one question.
Yeah,
from the
sure,
crowd.
please.
They're asking, any good uni to study for Chilean people, they say.
University.
Uni,
Yes.
but in Australia they say uni, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So this is one of the words we'll come up to later. Uni, university. So again, any word that's more than a few syllables, we cut it down. So uni. There are a lot of good universities in Australia, a lot of good unis to choose from. 2 of the main universities are the University of Sydney and the University of Melbourne. They are the 2 top universities in the country. If you have more of a political interest, if you're a political, okay, so you might study at the ACT, the University of, what is it called? The Australian National University. It's called, here in Canberra, it's called ANU. So that's more famous for government-related topics like politics.
If you give us 2, I think we're good.
Okay.
And another one?
Another one? Well,
that's the
if
only
you're
one.
going to study in Australia,
Yeah.
you might be going for a particular experience. So, of course, I would recommend choose your university based on your academic interest. Choose your university based on which one has a strong program for your field. But second, you might think about geography. Where do you want to live in terms of a place that is going to be comfortable and interesting? Some people might choose to study in the Gold Coast. There's a university here called Bond, and you'd be steps away from beaches and you would have a great time. You might choose to study at UTAS, University of Tasmania, if you want to have access to wonderful seafood and fewer people.
Is it cheaper or no?
Oh, I think it's going to be expensive no matter where you choose, it's going to be expensive. So perhaps it'll be a little bit cheaper here. Also, Tasmania has perhaps lower cost of living. So if you are trying to choose a cheaper place, avoid Sydney. It's very expensive, very exy. And you can choose Tasmania perhaps, or Adelaide. Adelaide has some of the lowest cost of living in Australia. and it's a beautiful city. So, good question. Thank you for the question. If you have any other questions, please feel free to
Normally
send
you
them
can
through.
work as a student in Australia too. They allow you, with a visa, student visa, you can work 20 hours a week.
Exactly.
So, helps.
So, these are the ways. This is how I ended up in Australia. If you are under the age of 30 or just at the age of 30, you have the opportunity to apply for a working holiday visa. And this gives you the opportunity to work in Australia, but be prepared. The kind of work you'll need to do is probably hospitality work, hospo, working in a cafe or a bar, a restaurant. The other option you have is agricultural work.
Picking on fruit.
Yeah, picking fruit in some of these areas, picking fruit in the outback, picking grapes near Adelaide. So those kinds of jobs are usually pretty easy to find, but the conditions might be challenging.
It's so hot too.
Yes, you might deal with hot weather, and maybe the pay rate is not great because it's such an expensive country, and you'll be in some remote areas, but a lot of the people I knew were looking for that experience. Okay, so in terms of culture, Australia is a place where people are very proud about being laid back, easygoing. So they like to have fun, and they don't take themselves too seriously. They like to have a laugh. They might make a joke about themselves. They're very friendly. They love to have parties and barbecues, and they're a little bit sarcastic. So they like to tease you, make fun of you, but if that's happening, it probably means that they like you and you're becoming friends. So be prepared for a little bit of sarcasm.
Any similarities between Chile and Australia, you find?
In terms of culture,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a bit hard to say for me. In terms of its position in the world, being in the southern hemisphere, I suppose that's similar, but this is a mountainous country with a lot of cold coastline, whereas Australia is quite a flat country with warm, beautiful water almost everywhere. So I think it's going to be a very, very different experience. But in terms of wide open spaces, I suppose that's similar for both countries. Okay, what kinds of things can you do in Australia? Beach, beach, beach. Life revolves around the beach. As you can see, most of the cities lie here on the water or very, very near the water. And people swim, sunbathe, surf, water ski, any manner of sports involving the ocean. And in addition to the beach...
Someone has a question.
Yes, please.
What about wild animals? I'm afraid of big spiders and stuff.
Okay, can we just put a pin in that question for a moment? We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so other activities you can do. You can go to the outback, the famous outback, and you can go bushwalking. So the bush.
What is the bush?
Good question. The bush generally means forest. But sometimes the forest, because it's such a dry country, sometimes the forest is quite low. Sometimes it's big towering trees, tall trees, but sometimes it's just short bushes. And so that is the bush, any sort of natural open area. And so you can go for a bushwalk, which is a wonderful thing to do. Spend time in nature. If you go to these kind of areas, you'll see stars like never before. So that's a great thing to enjoy. The last thing I'll say about activities to do is one similarity I just thought of, this being a similarity between Chile and Australia is wine culture. So in all of these areas of Australia, all through the southern part where it's a little bit cooler, and Tasmania, grapes grow very well, and so there's a strong wine culture. So if you enjoy trying new wines, this is a great country to go to. Some great wine regions around most of the major cities, so lots to enjoy. Okay, we had a great question from one of our attendees about the animals. Okay, there are heaps of dangerous animals in Australia. Okay, take a note here. Heaps of. I'm going to start erasing the board. Maybe just here.
Heaps.
This is something you'll hear all the time in Australia. It means lots of, several, many. So heaps. If you pour salt onto a table, it forms a heap, like a small mountain. So you have heaps of dangerous animals in Australia. Our attendee mentioned spiders. Yes, there are several very dangerous spiders. Snakes. I found a statistic, 21 from the top 25 most dangerous snakes are in Australia. Let's see, there are crocodiles. Crocs. Yeah.
Crocky.
So the crocodiles live up here in the northern part of Australia, and they're huge.
Crocky, mate.
Yes.
Do
And
you remember that guy that has said that?
Steve Irwin.
Yeah.
Yes. And he was killed by an animal actually, but it was a stingray.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But let's talk about these animals. Which ones are a threat and which ones are not? So, if you are over here in these cities, you probably won't see any dangerous animals. So that's a good thing. In the urban areas, in the cities, there are not many spiders, not many snakes, and so you're probably not going to see them unless you go into the bush. You may see some things if you're in the bush.
Sharks.
Yes. Sharks.
Sharks in the bush?
Sharks are all around the country, some here on the East Coast, but the main places you need to be concerned about sharks are over here. The water between Perth and South Africa, I think there are quite a lot of sharks, great white sharks. And unfortunately, almost every year, someone dies from a shark attack.
No.
Yes, unfortunately. But statistically, it's still very safe. The beaches are chockers. So that's our next word. Chockers. The beaches are chockers with people.
Like, full of people?
Exactly, they're full of people. You might also see chocker block. Chocker block. This means that it's full of people, so it's very, very unlikely.
How would you use that in a sentence?
We went to the beach today, but it was chockers, so we came back home.
And the whole thing, chock-a-block?
The train was a nightmare this morning. It was chock-a-block.
Oh.
I have seen this one like this too. Chock-a-block.
Okay.
Keep in mind, most of this Australian slang is just things that people say, so the spelling is not standard. You might see things spelled in different ways. When Australians write for university or uni, they do it the standard way. Okay, so this is all about speaking and what you're going to hear. So there are some dangerous animals in the water. On top of the sharks, there are, you might not expect this, jellyfish. There are several types of dangerous jellyfish. There are box jellyfish, blue bottles, or Portuguese man-of-war, and irrigangi. And these are quite dangerous jellyfish. They're very venomous, and if you get stung by several, you might start to have a breathing problem, and if you're in the water, that's where it becomes very dangerous. So if it just gets on your leg, you'll be okay probably, but if you're in the water and it's deep water, there's a risk of drowning. And up here, so these are in the northern areas mostly, and up here there are the crocs. crocodiles. And so, if you are camping in these areas, please be sure to read safety advice about crocodiles. They are very clever animals, and they watch you for a long time, and then they learn your patterns. And then if you go to the same place to wash your plate 3 days in a row, on the third day, okay. But please, seek professional advice from the parks department. I'm not an expert in animals, okay? And the last dangerous animal. Okay, this is a big secret, everyone, so you should come a little closer. Okay, I could probably be banned from Australia for telling this secret, but I'm going to share it with you. There's an animal in Australia called a drop bear. So let me erase this.
I'm scared.
It's a secret animal.
It's a secret animal. You might think, is this a koala bear? Oh, in Australia people don't say koala bear, they just say koala. No.
Kangaroo?
No. Good guess though. So, Australians, you're sitting around, maybe you're out in the bush, and they might start to warn you, okay, after the sun goes down, be careful about the drop bears. And then they all start to look very serious. And you're starting to think, whoa, what is this animal? I've never heard of this animal before. This is just the Australian sense of humor. It's a national joke. Everyone in Australia knows about the drop bears, but it's not a real animal. So don't worry, don't worry. They will tell you that you need to be careful about it, but they will give you 0 details. Why? Because it's all just a joke.
Okay.
But don't tell anyone else. Keep it a secret, because it's fun. Australians love to joke around, okay?
Were you scared about that animal?
Well, I was confused. I was like, I read a lot about Australia. How do I not know about this? Okay. Alright, so now we're going to get into some of the specific examples.
One question,
yes.
teacher, about how do we pronounce, for example, the animals? Because in Spanish we say kangaroo.
Yeah,
How do you say that?
Kanguru.
And we say koala.
Okay,
Is it the same?
good
In English?
question. So some of the more lovable animals. So we have kangaroo. Now this word has 3 syllables. Kangaroo. And the primary stress is here. Kangaroo. Secondary stress is here. So, loudest is here, second is here. Kangaroo. Kangaroo. And sometimes this just gets shortened to roo.
Kangaroo.
Maybe you have a roo burger. That means kangaroo burger.
Oh.
Okay. The other word.
You can actually
Burger?
buy the meat of the
Yes, yes.
Burger?
They sell the meat
Steaks,
in the supermarket.
burgers. It's very, very lean. There's not much fat, and it is quite healthy. It's rich in iron and other good minerals and vitamins. I
Did
suppose.
you try it?
Yes. It's gamey. It means it's a wild animal, so it has that taste from a wild animal. But it's a very sustainable meat. So if you're concerned about your impact on the environment, kangaroo are from Australia, and so you can eat them and feel like maybe I'm not having such a big impact on the environment. So if that's important to you, maybe switch away from beef. Beef has a big impact, and try some kangaroo. You can't eat it anywhere else. You might as well try it in Australia. So, koala, as I mentioned, it's not called a koala bear in Australia. And this has 3 syllables as well. Koala. So it kind of has the sound of wall. Koala.
What about wombat?
Wombat. Okay, a wombat is quite a slow animal. It's hard to see them. more likely you'll see one that has been hit by a car on the
yeah.
road, unfortunately. So a wombat looks a little bit like a beaver or some other kind of slow-moving animal that stays close to the ground. This one is a wombat. Wombat. There are lots of birds in Australia. One of the most famous birds is... What? I might have to double check the spelling. It's not a word that I write very often. A kookaburra. And this one has a very particular sound. They say that it laughs. You'll hear this bird a lot in the morning. So this is a kookaburra.
And what's the you know there's a bird that attacks you?
Ah, yes, the magpie. Okay, pronunciation is pretty easy on this one, magpie. A magpie protects its young, protects the nest, and so it swoops down and will try to attack your head. So when you're walking near their nest and they feel some threat, they might swoop and attack you. In fact, one of the sports teams in Australia, one of the football teams, is called the Magpies because it's quite a scary bird. A lot of people find it a bit scary. It doesn't actually hurt you, probably, but it just tries to scare you away. Are there any other animals? There's the Tasmanian devil.
Yeah.
That's a cute animal. Nothing like the cartoon, but you can look into that one online. Alright, so now I want to talk about some specific examples about Australian slang. Words that you'll really hear. And what I hope is that I can give you some examples that are going to be useful. If you look Australian slang online, on Google, you'll probably find some old examples. You'll find some sayings that are a bit unusual, and they'd be quite difficult to use maybe. So my hope is to give you some very practical examples that you can use and that you're going to hear from your Australian friends.
Is it difficult to understand the Australian accent?
Well, so I arrived in Australia. English is my first language. And in the beginning, it took my ear some adjustment. I won't say it's really difficult, but it is quite different, and maybe most of the movies you see are from America. Maybe the music you hear is from England, and so this one is a little different, and it might be new to you. So it's something that you just have to get used to. There can be some challenges, but if you just ask people to slow down or ask them to repeat it, I think they'll be very helpful. That's the nice thing about Australians. Very helpful people. But one of the key things that Australians do is shorten a word. Okay, so some of the major ways that we shorten are to end something with a E sound. Okay, so in the morning, the first thing you eat, we usually say breakfast, right? In Australia, you'll almost always hear people call it brekkie. Brekkie. Okay? It's shorter than breakfast. It's still 2 syllables, but we think that it's a nice sound. Okay? So ending things with an E. Another thing that you might hear is ending words with an O. O. So, for example, your friend might ask you to take them to the traino.
To what?
Could you please give me a ride to the traino? This is short for train station. Or you might hear someone talk about the garbo. This is the garbage collector.
What?
Okay, so garbage collector is such a long word, sounds very formal. Australians are not formal, they're so casual. Garbo.
Who talk like this? Like not anybody or young people?
I would say that almost anyone talks like this to some extent. Things like brekkie, your boss at work might say brekkie. The Prime Minister might say brekkie.
Oh my god.
But maybe not Garbo. Maybe not Treno. There's no rule that I can tell you. It's just some of these are more common than others. But it's a bit of a scale. Some people use them a lot. Some people don't use them so much. People at this end, we say they're oka. Is that the right spelling? Yes, I think so. Oka. If you're really oka, it means that you have a lot of Australian sound in your language. So maybe your accent is very strong. You use a lot of these Australian slang words and phrases. And so it means like very Aussie. Very, very Aussie.
What is Aussie?
Aussie. Good question. Aussie is short for Australian. So Aussie means Australian. And sometimes people over here are referred to as bogans. So this would be an adjective. He's really oka.
That's like in Chile flight test. That's how we.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
And the noun is he's a really oka bogan. Okay? A bogan is someone who it's a little bit rude, but some people are proud
It's
to
like
be
redneck?
brogan. It's a bit like redneck. So it gives this feeling of someone who is very down to earth and maybe not sophisticated, not elegant, maybe like a more blue-collar worker or working class person, and maybe it implies not as much education, something like this. It's hard to say exactly what it means. Some people think this is an insult. Some people feel proud to be a bogan. They say, yeah, I'm like a person who is salt of the earth. I'm an average person. I'm a bogan. So it just depends. But you'll hear this word a lot. Usually it's used as an insult.
Okay, let's learn more vocabulary about Australia.
Now, getting into it. As I
And the
mentioned,
rich people didn't say the rich or the people that have a lot of money or education. Do you have a name for that?
nothing specific that I can think of at this moment. Posh.
Posh.
But that's a word you see in England as well. So, it's a beautiful sunny day. You go to the beach. You need to grab some things and throw them in your ute. Ute. This is a vehicle. It's short for utility vehicle. So this is something that if you are a plumber or a tradie, this is a tradesperson. So people who do manual labor, building, that sort of thing, drive a ute. It has a place in the back where you can put things, your equipment, and many people in Australia drive a ute. Okay? So you're going to the beach. What do you need? Well, you need your sunnies, your boardies, your thongs, and your brolly. So, what is all that?
Oh, the language.
You need your sunnies. These are
Sunglasses.
sunglasses. Okay? So your sunnies. Very important. Very strong sun. You need your boardies. These are board shorts. You might prefer a different style. These are the long ones that surfers wear. You might prefer a different style. You can call them bathers. Any sort of swimwear can be called bathers. And because this is an important thing in Australia, when something is important in your culture, you have more words usually. So we have bathers. Some places they're called togs. Some places they're called Cozy, which is swimming costume. Today's Halloween. You might put on a Halloween costume. In some places it's called a swimming costume. Australia takes it down to cozy. You're swimming cozy. Okay, so different words.
They have a question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a tradie and a handyman?
A handyman is someone who does all kinds of things. Maybe they can work on the plumbing. Maybe they can build something. Maybe they can fix the roof. So a tradie is a very general term. And then we have a handyman. Usually a handyman has learned on their own, or maybe from their parents or grandparents. A tradie, however, usually has a qualification. You have to go to university. It's very formalized in Australia. You have to study, and then the result is that it's a profession, and usually the salary is really good. So if you want to be an electrician, or in Australia, a sparky, that's a very good job, especially in the resources industry. You might want to be a plumber, or maybe a carpenter, a chippy. Okay, so a carpenter is called a chippy.
Yeah, that's a good thing. For example, to do this type of jobs in Chile, in Australia, are well paid. So
Yes.
something good to do there.
Well, if you're on a working holiday visa, it might be difficult to get one of those jobs, but there are other pathways that you can go there for work. You can get a skilled migration visa, and yes, things like electricians and other types of tradespeople are needed in Australia. So that's a good way to get a visa, and the salaries are usually very high. All right, great questions.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We have like five minutes to
finish.
to
Yeah.
finish.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure, okay. I said you might need your thongs at the beach.
Thongs.
Thongs. Now, if you hear this word, you might think, ugh, is someone asking me to bring some underwear? Okay, so in many places, thong means a type of underwear. But in Australia, it means flip-flops, what you put on your feet. And this is interesting because actually where I come from in the United States, we say thongs as well.
Oh, really?
Even though it's on the other side of the planet. So these are flip-flops. Okay? And I said you need your brolly. Brolly. So this one might be a little bit hard to guess. This is short for umbrella.
Oh.
So I recommend if you go to the beach, take an umbrella so you have some protection from the sun because it's very strong and you'll get a sunburn. Okay, so you've got everything in your ute and you want to have a Barbie. So this one is one of the main activities in Australia. It's one of the most Australian things. A Barbie.
And
Which
not the
is-
doll.
Not the doll. No. It's a barbecue. Okay, so everyone has Barbies all the time. And what do you need for a Barbie?
Meat.
Well, you need some meat. So you might need to get a chook. You might need to get a chook to put on the Barbie. This is chicken. So normally if we eat it, we normally say chicken, but if it's an animal, we call it a chook. Or if it's a whole chook that you might take home and cook. Cook the chook. All right? And you probably want to have some drinks, right? So you'll go to the bottle-o. This is the bottle shop where you can go to buy some alcoholic drinks. In Australia, it's separate from the servo. In America, we can stop into the service station.
It's like the 7-Eleven. Something
Yeah.
like that.
In most places in the United States, you can stop into a service station or a gas station. But in Australia, you cannot buy beer at the servo, you have to go to the bottle-o. And you want to keep it cold, right? So you're going to need an esky. Now, this one takes a little bit of explaining. This is from the word Eskimo, which was a brand of what we call in the United States a cooler, or maybe an ice box. It's an insulated box to keep your drinks cold with ice. All right, you might buy some tinnies.
What are those?
Tinnies means a can of beer.
Oh.
Because the can is made from tin, or it used to be. I think now it's aluminium. Or, if you're like me, you prefer craft beer, right? Something a little bit more flavorful, interesting. Then you'll grab some stubbies, and you'll need your stubby holder.
Do the Australians like that the foreigners use these words? Or?
I think they probably find it funny. I hope no Australians are watching and going to criticize me. Maybe my pronunciation is a little bit too American. But I think Australians expect you to learn these words because these words are words you'll hear all the time.
At least know what it means, right?
Yes, maybe you don't have to say the word yourself, but you need to understand if someone says, you walk into a bottle shop, a bottle-o, you walk into the bottle-o and you say, I'd like to buy some beer. And they might say, tinnies or stubbies? You need to know what that means. Tinnies are probably the cheaper, the national beer. Stubbies might be, it's a bottle of beer. This is a bottle of beer, a glass bottle, so it might be craft beer. And if you need to have a stubby holder, which is a cloth sleeve that you put on your bottle, and it helps to keep your beer a little bit colder in the hot Australian sun. So we'll call this a sleeve for the bottle of beer. In the United States, we also have a funny word. We call it a koozie. I'm not sure the spelling of that koozie. Okay. All right, so I think we'll finish up there. Now, if you can't use all these words, no worries. Another Australian word, don't worry. No worries.
No worries.
No worries.
She'll be right.
She'll be right.
She'll be right, mate.
She'll be right, mate. So that means, don't worry, everything will be all right. But if you can use these words, good on ya. Which means, good job. Good on ya.
Good on you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Cheers, mates. I'll see you next time.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.